Emotional intelligence. It is the ability to identify, assess, and control your own emotions and be aware of the emotions of others. I'm not going to go into too much detail there because that's not the purpose of this video. This video is how do you do that? Number one, it's to design an environment / foxhole that makes good decisions for you. Number two, habit stack. You're going to habit stack healthy habits, so you put them right in front of you. They get in your way, so you're moving into the flow. And number three, to vacuum out negative influences. We're going to cover just to design your environment in this video. So what does that look like? How do you design an environment? So here's the research right now. You've perhaps heard of the term emerging adults. If not, it's the new buzzword in the research about the millennials, especially the younger millennials, although it's applicable to the older. What's that mean? Younger millennials, 20 to 30, older millennials, 30 to 40. This is what's going on. The current emerging adult population is roughly 10 years behind in their social skills compared to previous generations. That's a byproduct of a lot of things, primarily their parents, and their parents are the byproduct of their parents. So I'm not trying to put blame on any one thing, but there's an environment out there where parents are no longer just helicopter parents, they're snowplow parents. They're moving everything out of the way of their children, so their children are not learning how to grow when they or get up when they fall down. It's learned helplessness. We need children to fall down. They have to fall down. They have to learn. They have to grow. So here's a quick quote to help you understand that. In the sayings, we do not help our children by preventing them from falling. One learns how to recover from falling by falling. A skater moves forward by pushing left and right. People who have never experienced failure or falling are off balance without an awareness of their situation. That's why the containers right now, the foxholes that these kids grew up in, are so harmful. They're not learning the principles that are designed for their first half of life. So again, to put in context, life is divided into two parts. You have your first half and your second half. You cannot walk the second half of life's journey using the tools of the first half. You need a new toolkit. This is a new toolkit. Your first half of life tools are based upon survival and just getting by from day to day. Second half of life is used to thrive, to connect, to learn the things that are critical to balance yourself out. If your environment as a child was principle-based, you had rules of engagement, conditions of satisfaction, you knew how to self-advocate, getting enough sleep, eating correctly, exercising appropriately. And so what this first one is, this principle-based environment, is what I'm suggesting you move to. Now notice the comparison. This is what typically an emerging adult's life was like. Their family was either chaotic or rigid or both. Mine was both. Their behaviors are based on traditions. And we now know from the neurosciences that are giving us this information, every person is carrying the DNA, the behaviors, up to 11 generations deep. So if you're a highly critical or really a sarcasticist or whatever, you've got threads of you running through this maladaptive behavior from family going back many generations. So if you grew up in an environment where mom was constantly trying to get others to see her, to give her the affirmation, affection, and approval, or your dad was constantly very rigid or in the drama triangle, whatever, you means you had low self-awareness. You became a self-help junkie. I can't tell you how many people come into my office and can quote verbatim, verse by verse, the very material that I've studied. But knowledge is not power. Only if you can apply it. So being a self-help junkie is not the same as being a lifelong learner, is not the same as having a fixed mindset or an open mindset, a growth mindset. Learning how to apply these is so important. And then one of the things that is just so harmful is people who engage in venting, looping, which are addictions. That's it. That's an environment that you grow up in. So here's what I want to point out. The world will now have us believe, and this is the most recent research, there are 3 myths in the world that are creating the environment for our emerging adults. Number 1, people are fragile. They're not. Number 2, They use emotions to reason. That's ludicrous. That's the exact opposite from the upstairs and downstairs metaphor or model that I showed you earlier. Remember, since the 1200s, we've been taught that IQ reigns. Just be reasonable and rational. The pendulum, here's balanced. IQ is everything, no feelings. Block the critical faculty. Don't have anything down here. Be completely in your head. It's now flipped. Now it's all emotions. Well, I know that the data here shows this, but that's not what I believe, so that's not where I'm going with it anyway. The current myth is that you can use emotions to do all your reasoning. And lastly, it's always an us versus them. And here's another thing they do. To be offended is honorable. I get to put a badge. And the more offended I am, the more of the 3 A's I get to collect. And then we have a call-out culture based on opinions. Now just contrast these 3 environments. I'm suggesting, and what we're teaching here in the protocol, follow the principle-based. Learn the rules of engagement, the conditions of satisfaction, how to self-advocate. So here's why. We want you to design an environment that makes decisions for you. That's why it's a principle-based environment. For example, when you go to bed, is your bedtime routine organized? Are you following a sacred hour? Because your morning routine will be completely set up by your bedtime routine. What other routines do you not have? Do you have a learning routine, an exercise routine, an eating routine? How do you rejuvenate routine? And then do you actually practice emotional intimacy? What I'm suggesting here is too often we put so much effort into doing everything, but it's effortless power. It's powerless effort. What we want is effortless power. If the environment's making decisions for you, this is how I focus. I can just be all here and just run my life, being in the now, learning how to habit stack, deliberately practicing, having a culture or environment that makes the decisions for me. That's why this is so important. Thanks for listening. See you soon.